MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16 Number. Analysis. In the Old Stone Age, small bands of 20 to 60 people wandered from place to place in Indiana search of food. 260. Once people began farming, they could settle down near their farms. As a result, towns and villages grew larger. Living in communities allowed people to organize themselves more efficiently. They could divide up the work of producing food and other things they needed. While some workers grew crops, others built new houses and made tools. Village dwellers also learned to work together to do a task faster. For example, toolmakers could share the work of making stone axes and knives. By working together, they could make more tools in the same amount of time. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16 Number. 01. Maybe you've heard this joke. How do you eat an elephant? The answer is one bite at a time. So, how do you build the earth? That's simple, 2, 1 atom at a time. Atoms are the basic building blocks of crystals, and since all rocks are made up of crystals, the more you know about atoms, the better. Crystals come in a variety of shapes that scientists call habits. Common crystal habits include squares, triangles, and six-sided hexagons. Usually crystals form when liquids cool, such as when you create ice cubes. Many times, crystals form in ways that do not allow for perfect shapes. If conditions are too cold, too hot, or there isn't enough source material, they can form strange, twisted shapes. But when conditions are right, we see beautiful displays. Usually, this involves a slow, steady environment where the individual atoms have plenty of time to join and fit perfectly into what's known as the crystal lattice. This is the basic structure of atoms that is seen time after time. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16 Number. 02. Managers are always looking for ways to increase productivity, which is the ratio of costs to output in production. Adam Smith, writing when the manufacturing industry was new, described a way that production could be made more efficient, known as the division of labor. Adam Smith. Making most manufactured goods involves several different processes using different skills. Smith's example was the manufacture of pins. The wire is straightened, sharpened, a head is put on, and then it is polished. Smith. One worker could do all these tasks, and make 20 pins in a day. 20. But this work can be divided into its separate processes, with a number of workers each performing one task. Because each worker specializes in one job, he or she can work much faster without changing from one task to another. Now 10 workers can produce thousands of pins in a day, a huge increase in productivity from the 200 they would have produced before. 10. 200. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16 Number. 03. Natural processes form minerals in many ways. For example, hot melted rock material, called magma, cools when it reaches the Earth's surface, or even if it's trapped below the surface. As magma cools, its atoms lose heat energy, move closer together, and begin to combine into compounds. During this process, atoms of the different compounds arrange themselves into orderly, repeating patterns. The type and amount of elements present in a magma partly determine which minerals will form. Also, the size of the crystals that form depends partly on how rapidly the magma cools. When magma cools slowly, the crystals that form are generally large enough to see with the unaided eye. This is because the atoms have enough time to move together and form into larger crystals. When magma cools rapidly, the crystals that form will be small. In such cases, you can't easily see individual mineral crystals. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16 Number 04. Each beech tree grows in a particular location and soil conditions can vary greatly in just a few yards. The soil can have a great deal of water or almost no water. It can be full of nutrients or not. Accordingly, each tree grows more quickly or more slowly and produces more or less sugar, and thus you would expect every tree to be photosynthesizing at a different rate. However, the rate is the same. Whether they are thick or thin, all the trees of the same species are using light to produce the same amount of sugar per leaf. Some trees have plenty of sugar and some have less, but the trees equalize this difference between them by transferring sugar. This is taking place underground through the roots. Whoever has an abundance of sugar hands some over, whoever is running short gets help. Their network acts as a system to make sure that no trees fall too far behind. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16 Number 05. With nearly a billion hungry people in the world, there is obviously no single cause. 10. However, far and away the biggest cause is poverty. 79% of the world's hungry live in nations that are net exporters of food. 79. How can this be? The reason people are hungry in those countries is that the products produced there can be sold on the world market for more than the local citizens can afford to pay for them. In the modern age you do not starve because you have no food, you starve because you have no money. So the problem really is that food is, in the grand scheme of things, too expensive and many people are too poor to buy it. The answer will be in continuing the trend of lowering the cost of food. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16 Number 06. According to legend, once a vampire bites a person, that person turns into a vampire who seeks the blood of others. A researcher came up with some simple math, which proves that these highly popular creatures can't exist. University of Central Florida physics professor Kostas Efthimiou's work breaks down the myth. University of Central Florida Kostas Efthimiou. Suppose that on January 1, 1600, the human population was just over 500 million. 1600115. If the first vampire came into existence that day and bit one person a month, there would have been 2 vampires by February 1, 1600. 160021. A month later there would have been 4, the next month 8, then 16, and so on. In just 2.5 years, the original human population would all have become vampires with no humans left. 2. But look around you. Have vampires taken over the world? No, because there's no such thing. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16 Number 07. Robert Schumann once said, "The laws of morals are those of art." Robert Schumann. What the great man is saying here is that there is good music and bad music. The greatest music, even if it's tragic in nature, takes us to a world higher than ours, somehow the beauty uplifts us. Bad music, on the other hand, degrades us. It's the same with performances. A bad performance isn't necessarily the result of incompetence. Some of the worst performances occur when the performers, no matter how accomplished, are thinking more of themselves than of the music they're playing. These doubtful characters aren't really listening to what the composer is saying, they're just showing off, hoping that they'll have a great success with the public. The performer's basic task is to try to understand the meaning of the music, and then to communicate it honestly to others. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16 Number 08. Literary works, by their nature, suggest rather than explain, they imply rather than state their claims boldly and directly. This broad generalization, however, does not mean that works of literature do not include direct statements. Depending on when they were written and by whom, literary works may contain large amounts of direct telling and lesser amounts of suggestion and implication. But whatever the proportion of a work's showing to telling, there is always something for readers to interpret. Thus we ask the question, what does the text suggest? As a way to approach literary interpretation, as a way to begin thinking about a text's implications. What a text implies is often of great interest to us. And our work of figuring out a text's implications tests our analytical powers. In considering what a text suggests, we gain practice in making sense of texts. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16, Number 09. Understanding how to develop respect for and a knowledge of other cultures begins with re-examining the Golden Rule. I treat others in the way I want to be treated. This rule makes sense on some level. If we treat others as well as we want to be treated, we will be treated well in return. This rule works well in a monocultural setting, where everyone is working within the same cultural framework. In a multicultural setting, however, where words, gestures, beliefs, and views may have different meanings, this rule has an unintended result. It can send a message that my culture is better than yours. It can also create a frustrating situation where we believe we are doing what is right, but what we are doing is not being interpreted in the way in which it was meant. This miscommunication can lead to problems. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16, Number 10. In a study, a researcher pretending to be a volunteer surveyed a California neighborhood, asking residents if they would allow a large sign reading "Drive carefully" to be displayed on their front lawns. To help them understand what it would look like, the volunteer showed his participants a picture of the large sign blocking the view of a beautiful house. Naturally, most people refused, but in one particular group, an incredible 76% actually approved. 76. The reason that they agreed was this. 2 weeks earlier, these residents had been asked by another volunteer to make a small commitment to display a tiny sign that read "Be a safe driver" in their windows. 2. Since it was such a small and simple request, nearly all of them agreed. The astonishing result was that the initial small commitment deeply influenced their willingness to accept the much larger request 2 weeks later. 2. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16, Number 11. Starting from birth, babies are immediately attracted to faces. Scientists were able to show this by having babies look at two simple images, one that looks more like a face than the other. By measuring where the babies looked, scientists found that the babies looked at the face-like image more than they looked at the non-face image. Even though babies have poor eyesight, they prefer to look at faces. But why? One reason babies might like faces is because of something called evolution. Evolution involves changes to the structures of an organism, such as the brain, that occur over many generations. These changes help the organisms to survive, making them alert to enemies. By being able to recognize faces from afar or in the dark, humans were able to know someone was coming and protect themselves from possible danger. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16, Number 12. If you had to write a math equation, you probably wouldn't write 28 plus 14 equals 42. It would take too long to write and it would be hard to read quickly. You would write 28 plus 14 equals 42. 28 plus 14 equals 42. Chemistry is the same way. Chemists have to write chemical equations all the time, and it would take too long to write and read if they had to spell everything out. So chemists use symbols, just like we do in math. A chemical formula lists all the elements that form each molecule and uses a small number to the bottom right of an element's symbol to stand for the number of atoms of that element. For example, the chemical formula for water is H2O. H2O. That tells us that a water molecule is made up of 2 hydrogen, H and 2, atoms and 1 oxygen, O, atom. H2O. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16, Number 13. Imagine yourself at a party. It is dark and a group of friends ask you to take a picture of them. You grab your camera, point, and shoot your friends. The camera automatically turns on the flash as there is not enough light available to produce a correct exposure. The result is half of your friends appear in the picture with 2 bright red circles instead of their eyes. This is a common problem called the red eye effect. It is caused because the light from the flash penetrates the eyes through the pupils, and then gets reflected to the camera from the back of the eyes where a large amount of blood is present. This blood is the reason why the eyes look red in the photograph. This effect is more noticeable when there is not much light in the environment. This is because pupils dilate when it is dark, allowing more light to get inside the eye and producing a larger red eye effect. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16, Number 14. Mirrors and other smooth, shiny surfaces reflect light. We see reflections from such surfaces because the rays of light form an image on the retina of our eyes. Such images are always reversed. Look at yourself in a mirror, wink your right eye and your left eye seems to wink back at you. You can use a mirror to send a coded message to a friend. Stand a mirror upright on the table, so that a piece of paper on the table can be clearly seen in the mirror. Now write a message that looks right when you look in the mirror. Keep your eyes on the reflected image while you are writing and not on your paper. After a little practice, it will be easier to write backwards. When your friend receives such a message, he will be able to read it by holding the paper up to a mirror. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16, Number 15. Students work to get good grades even when they have no interest in their studies. People seek job advancement even when they are happy with the jobs they already have. It's like being in a crowded football stadium, watching the crucial play. A spectator several rows in front stands up to get a better view, and a chain reaction follows. Soon everyone is standing, just to be able to see as well as before. Everyone is on their feet rather than sitting, but no one's position has improved. And if someone refuses to stand, he might just as well not be at the game at all. When people pursue goods that are positional, they can't help being in the rat race. To choose not to run is to lose. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 16, Number 16. When we compare human and animal desire, we find many extraordinary differences. Animals tend to eat with their stomachs, and humans with their brains. When animals' stomachs are full, they stop eating, but humans are never sure when to stop. When they have eaten as much as their bellies can take, they still feel empty, they still feel an urge for further gratification. This is largely due to anxiety, to the knowledge that a constant supply of food is uncertain. Therefore, they eat as much as possible while they can. It is due, also, to the knowledge that, in an insecure world, pleasure is uncertain. Therefore, the immediate pleasure of eating must be exploited to the full, even though it does violence to the digestion. MTC. Good job.